from my childhood, I remember like we were Throwdown fans. And dude, Throwdown was so controversial within that sort of straight edge scene because they just clearly were a lot more lighthearted with it. And what was the Baby Got Back cover that they did? That was like a huge moment in terms of like a lot of the straight edge bands we're listening to, because it was so unnerving for us to see a band being like a hardcore straight edge band being, you know, funny and doing this goofy ass cover that eventually got so fucking big that it just was kind of annoying. But that kind of became at a certain point. That was like huge. Everybody's Throwdown song that they downloaded off Napster.
Yeah. I remember that period. There was a lot of judgment, and it was kind of hard to be Attila during that period because we were the only band kind of straying from the path. But you know, the biggest example I can give you is our biggest album, About That Life. When we released it, we were doing our first Warped Tour. It was 2014, I believe. And when we released that album had so much rap influence. It had so much like just edgy, offensive material. When we dropped it, I swear I felt like the whole world hated it. I felt like I failed, kind of, you know? All the reviews, all the press, all the magazines, everyone wrote the worst shit about us. And then I swear like 3 months went by and it became our biggest album ever, and everybody loved it. So it was kind of like, did all this negative press turn around and bring an audience to us that actually likes it now? Like the negativity helped us almost. And I remember that year on Warped Tour, it was our first Warped, so we were only supposed to do half of Warped. And then about a week before we were supposed to ditch and go home, Kevin Lyman comes up to me and is like, yo, can you guys do the whole Warped Tour? Because you're killing it right now. Like, really? We want you to just stay on, please. And we were just like, no. Like, we got plans. Sorry. Like, you should have let us do the whole thing to begin with.
But is that how they book Warped Tour, or how they used to book Warped Tour? Is that they would only have you on for a percentage of the whole thing at first?
Not always. It was just a thing with like newer bands. Like if it was your first time on Warped, they'd give you like half or select dates. And then the only other rule with Warped was that you can't play main stage 2 years in a row.
Really?
So if you play main stage, you got to take off a year.
Wow.
But you could play 2 years in a row if you upgrade stages, like Monster to main.
Do you think I missed out on something big in my life by never having gone on Warped Tour? I feel like...
Bro, you never went to Warped Tour?
I went when I was 14 and watched from the crowd, but I never like went on Warped Tour.
Oh, okay.
I feel like being a band on tour would just...
You never went to Warp? What the fuck?
I did go one time, and I don't know that I remember it that fun because it was just so unbelievably hot. And I was still very much at the age where I was just standing around watching the mosh pits with just my jaw dropped. Like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? And I saw Eminem perform, too, and they threw shit at him until he got off stage.
Yeah, how fucking crazy is that?
That sounds kind of... And Black Eyed Peas, too.
Damn.
They played, too.
I mean... You didn't miss out on much because it is like the most grueling tour to be on, like when you're touring on it. Like It's so hot that the buses break down every day. You're sweaty as shit. You have to go shit in a porta potty every day. Like, it's not a comfortable tour. It's not glamorous, but it's an opportunity for bands to play in front of a huge audience that they wouldn't normally have. And I don't know. It's just a whole community of people. And that's why I was really like disappointed when Warped Tour went away, and that's why I wanted to be the person that brings Warped Tour back.
Really? So that's still a conversation or a possibility?
So this is probably the biggest question I ever get asked is like, yo, Franz, when's Warped Tour coming back? But the reality of it is I can't disclose too much information, but for legal reasons, Warped Tour cannot come back for another 3 years or so. And me and the founder, Kevin Lyman, are actually good friends. A lot of people don't know that, but the reason is for the 4 years we did Warped Tour, I was hustling my clothing company, Stay Sick, on Warped as well. So I was awake bright and early every morning. And no band dudes wake up in the morning. All band dudes wake up sometime in the afternoon. But I was the first person in a band to be awake every single morning, and Kevin saw that and respected me for wanting to work hard and push my brand and grow myself. So we became friends, and he likes to drink beer too, so we ended up drinking beer all the time and just having conversations. And I'll never forget, it was probably like Warped Tour 2017 maybe, or 2018. He pulled me aside in San Diego and was like, Franz, like, do you want to buy Warped Tour? Like, do you want to take over? Like, I'm done. And he threw out a number. The number was a little beyond what I had at the moment, but just the thought of that really, like, it never left me because I wanted to do it. And I retouched conversation with him shortly after just to be like, hey, I'm serious. Like, I want to do this because Warped Tour was important for me growing up, and I know it's important for our current generation and future generations. And I'm very much a businessman, so I want to be the one that takes on Warped Tour. And we had a conversation probably, I don't know, 3 months ago, I would say. 3 or 4 months ago, and he explained to me that for legal reasons, which I can't go into depth, Warped Tour can't come back for at least another 3 years or so. But after that, I'm happy to reopen conversation, and hopefully I'm the one that brings it back because I have a really good plan for how to make it sustainable and make Warped Tour even bigger than it's ever been.
Definitely. Do you think that that's been a huge blow to the sort of guitar-based music world in general? Because that was always kind of like the main stage, especially for bands who aren't necessarily big enough to do their own massive tours and stuff. It just like probably helped incubate a shitload of bands over the years.
It did. It really did. And I can speak on behalf of myself and Attila. It helped us out a lot. And I would hate for bands to miss out on that opportunity. So, yeah, I think it was a crucial tour. And now that it's gone, it's kind of like, what the hell do we do every summer?
Right.
I mean, obviously now it's COVID, so we're not doing anything at all. But before this pandemic started, Warped Tour was the tour of summer. And any bands or any other festivals that tried to compete with Warped failed.
Right.
Or at least suffered a loss, because Warped was always the biggest.
Right.
I just think that, like, from my experience on Warped Tour and my knowledge, that I could have carried the torch and made it better, essentially.
Definitely. Is part of the reason why they're scared to come back, I feel like I read this a while ago, is that basically there could potentially be a lot of like pending lawsuits that they might have had to deal with, or that, like, you know, because basically like the standard of what was considered acceptable all through the 90s and 2000s on tour and stuff, that there's probably a lot of stuff that happened with band dudes and whatnot. Like that's kind of what I heard, was just that there's a lot of liability that might have come around to screw Warped Tour over.
No, you're absolutely right. The lawsuits were a big thing, but on top of that, I think Kevin Lyman is just an older gentleman. He's been around for a while. I think social media kind of killed it, because he started using Twitter a lot and stuff, and he would read everything and respond to everything. And a lot of people, of course, you know, social media, people just go on to talk shit to you. So people are on there talking shit to Kevin Lyman every day. So he's on his phone half the day stressing out about all these people complaining. But you put someone like me in control of the tour,
who is very, very numb to the hatred, right?
I'm numb. I've gotten talked shit to every day of my fucking life,
right?
Every single day. So my focus would just be running the tour, making sure everyone is happy, and I wouldn't care if someone was like, "Hey, fuck you, Franz," like whatever. I'd be like, "Cool."
Right. When you look at what made Attila successful, though, because like when you talk about waking up early in the morning to sell merch and all this kind of stuff, it's like, do you put it on like yourself, just sort of having this vision of how to build this band up, or do you sort of chalk up a lot of it to you just having this work ethic that maybe a lot of other people don't have?
Literally, I'm unlike anyone else. I have a work ethic that no one in music really has. Like, no offense to everyone else, oops. But no, I grew up as an entrepreneur, and I always knew how to like hustle and make way for myself. My parents told me from day one, like, we're not going to give you anything. Like, if you want something, like, work hard, get it. And I appreciate that, because it turned me into who I am. But yeah, I mean, most musicians are just very like strictly music, art focused, and when it comes to business, like, they could be getting screwed over for all they know, and they would just have no clue.
And there's like a thing in rock music, I feel like, or at least in like hardcore and shit, where to make a lot of money is like really kind of looked down upon. And, you know, people will like go out of their way to sort of like not share how much their band gets paid and stuff. I remember back in like 2003 that a dude who like booked like a Bane show told me that they got $2,500 for the night, and I'm like sitting there mind blown. Like I'm like
that it was so little.
No, there was so much. I'm like, they must be so rich. Like I'm going through the numbers in my head. I'm like, that's fucking crazy. Like, but that's hardcore and metal. They're like, people just kind of, I don't know. A lot of the fans are too young to really know about the financial side of having to make it work. Because like when I think about it now, obviously $2,500 to drive between cities with 5 guys plus like everybody else that's involved with the tour, etc. It's really probably turning a relatively small profit after that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of part of it too. Like running a successful clothing company. I remember like being on hardcore message boards and shit that it would seem like the guys who are running popular clothing lines immediately started to be treated like they were fucking robber barons who were just stealing from the scene,
No, for real. Like the only, like I tell this to everyone, especially in like the hardcore metal scene, if you want to sustain yourself and be able to make good income doing what you're doing, you have to have multiple sources of income. And it doesn't have to mean like, hey, follow my blueprint, like start a clothing company, start an OnlyFans. It could mean anything. Like some people are good at making graphic designs. That's something you can do while you're on the road. Pop your laptop open, make graphic designs. Some people can do video editing, lyric videos. Like some people can be a producer on the side when they're home. Like literally just figure out a way to make extra sources of income beyond music, because if you want to start a metal or hardcore band and you expect to make like a healthy, handsome living off of it, you're not. Like it's just not a thing. And I never went into this genre expecting to make money, and I think that's what sets me apart from a lot of people nowadays that just view the idea of I'm going to be rich and famous, like I'm going to be in a band or I'm going to be a musician or whatever. That's not a thing. Like I did it because I loved music, and for the first 6 years Attila was a band, I didn't make a penny, but I didn't care. I was just traveling across the whole country and getting fucked up with my friends and getting tons of pussy. Like I can't complain. Like that was cool. I didn't want to make money. I just wanted to have fun. But I think like the turning point for me was when I was 21, I had my first kid, and I was like, oh shit, like now I need to make money for someone else. And I'm not even really making money. And I think that's when my business brain tuned in, and I said, hey, like how can I create a sustainable future for my kid? I want him to be like in a good environment. So I started working a lot harder and partying slightly less maybe. And then, but yeah, I mean, I suggest that to everyone. I try to help out all my friends too and give them ideas of ways they can create extra income, because yeah, our music genre doesn't really make money.
Do you feel like has it gotten smaller throughout your time being involved with it? Like from your perspective, is the scene growing or dying?
To be honest, I think it's just like everything else. It goes through waves, And I think right now, I think we might be at a low point, but I think that like when you look at the current world climate, like pandemic, like crazy political issues, all of this is usually about the time that like rock and roll and punk rock in general starts coming right back up. So it's kind of just like, are you able to withstand the waves and continue on and succeed, or are you going to be crushed by this below and the pandemic's going to ruin your band and you're not going to be able to go back to touring?
It's kind of crazy because now I feel like there's so little guitar-based music on the radio that, like, for me as a kid, I'm listening to all these like alternative and rock bands when I'm like 13, and then that leads me to being like, okay, well, Blink-182 is cool, but I want to find out about all these other punk bands, and I want to find, Metallica's cool, I want to find out about all these harder metal bands. So all of a sudden I'm learning about black metal and death metal and hardcore and grindcore. It almost feels like on a mainstream level there's not necessarily like a good entry point. Like I feel like the scene is kind of set for that, in the sense that you could imagine like a rock band coming out and being like huge, massive stars, but it sometimes it feels like, and especially with, rap has gotten ridiculously huge, dance music was fucking huge for a while. It feels like sometimes like the guitar-based stuff, like there's no entry point.
You're right, it's tough, but I think for me personally, the coolest thing that I've noticed, especially the past couple years, is the influence of rock in rap and the influence of rap in rock.
Okay.
And I think that, like, I like both genres. I like rap equally as much as I love metal and hardcore, But I think that's the coolest thing for me, is seeing the genres kind of like blend a little more than they used to, because before it was a taboo thing. It was like one or the other, but now it's kind of like, hey, we can exchange like styles, like whether it's like clothes, like styles within the music. It kind of all is starting to blend, which I like more, because I was always a big fan of Limp Bizkit and nu metal and stuff like that, and like, why shouldn't that be big?
Yeah, isn't that weird to think about? Because like Limp Bizkit were so dope to me when I was 13, but then by the time I like really started to learn about punk and hardcore and stuff, I all of a sudden couldn't rationalize being a proud Korn and Limp Bizkit fan. And then I remember like years later when I started to realize like, oh, there's guys who are my age that are not ashamed of their Limp Bizkit fandom. Maybe, because I feel like once you're a fan of something, you have no business ever acting like you're an elitist that can't be a fan of that thing. Even if it was your goofy ass 13-year-old self that likes something, you still like that. Like you can say, I don't really like it the same way I used to, but you need to pay respect to that era in your life of that part of your personality that appreciated that music at that moment. Because even if you are a couple years removed and you're like, oh, I don't know why I like that shit, by the time you're like 10 years removed, you're going to be able to look at that shit and be like, you know what? That was dope,
Exactly.
Yeah.